She read my mind, but what she found made her fall for me. First Contact Protocol Captain Jake Morrison had handled first contact scenarios before, but never one quite like this. The Zephyrian delegate stood at the airlock of the UES Starbound, her crystalline blue skin catching the overhead lights like faceted gemstones. Ambassador Nixa wore flowing robes that seemed to shift between silver and pearl, and her large, opalescent eyes held an intelligence that made Jake's pulse quicken. "Welcome aboard, Ambassador," he said, extending his hand in the traditional human greeting. "I'm Captain Morrison, your escort to the Peace Summit." Nixa's eyes suddenly widened, and she took a sharp step backward. Her melodic voice carried a note of panic. "Captain, your thoughts, and they're so loud I can hear them echoing through my mind like thunder." Jake blinked, his training kicking in. The briefing had mentioned Zephyrian telepathic abilities, but nothing about involuntary reception. "I apologize if I'm broadcasting something inappropriate. What exactly are you hearing?" A delicate flush of deeper blue spread across her cheeks. "You're thinking about how beautiful you find my species, how elegant our bone structure is, and..." She covered her face with slender hands. "Oh, stars. You're wondering if Zephyrian lips are as soft as they appear." Jake felt his own cheeks burn. I didn't realize you could hear that level of detail. The briefing said your people were telepathic, but not usually this sensitive." Nixa interrupted, lowering her hands to reveal eyes bright with embarrassment. "Human minds are different. Your emotions are so vivid, so warm. Most species think in concepts and images, but humans, you think in full sensory experiences." As if to prove her point, Jake's mind immediately conjured an image of what it might be like to trace the delicate line of her jaw with his fingertips. Nixa gasped softly. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I'll try to control my thoughts." "Don't apologize," she said, surprising him. "It's just overwhelming. Your people feel everything so intensely. When you looked at me, I could feel the genuine appreciation, the curiosity, She trailed off, that blue flush deepening. "The attraction?" Jake supplied gently. She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "It's been centuries since anyone found our kind beautiful. Most species see us as useful for our abilities, nothing more." Jake stepped closer, his voice soft. "Then they're blind fools." The thought that accompanied his words was so gentle, so sincere, that Nixa looked up at him with wonder. In his mind, she saw herself through his eyes. Graceful, luminous, fascinating. Not a tool or a diplomatic asset, but a woman worthy of admiration. "Your thoughts are kind," she whispered. "They're honest," he replied. "That's what makes this interesting. Dangerous honesty." The journey to the Centauri station was supposed to take 3 days, but Jake was already discovering that traveling with a telepath made every moment an exercise in mental discipline. Nixa had taken to the ship's guest quarters, but they shared meals in the small dining area, where every stray thought became public. "You're trying very hard not to think about my hands," Nixa observed over their second breakfast together, her tone somewhere between amused and flustered. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. "I'm trying to be professional." "Your definition of professional is quite creative," she said, that blue blush returning. "You're imagining holding them while explaining human courtship rituals. Can you blame me? You have beautiful hands." Jake set down his cup and studied her face. "This must be exhausting for you, constantly hearing everyone's thoughts." "Not everyone's," Nixa admitted. "Most minds are like distant radio signals. I can tune them out if I focus. But yours..." She paused, searching for the right words. "It's like you're broadcasting directly into my consciousness. I can't shut it out." Jake leaned forward, intrigued, despite himself. "Is that why they assigned you to this mission? Because you can read human thoughts so clearly?" Nix's expression grew troubled. "Partially. My father hopes I can provide insight into human negotiation tactics. But there's something else." She hesitated, then met his eyes. "I volunteered because I wanted to understand your species better. We've heard rumors about human emotional capacity, about the depth of your feelings. I was curious. And now that you've experienced it firsthand, it's terrifying, she whispered, and exhilarating. The way you feel appreciation, desire, protective instincts. It's like standing in a warm ocean after a lifetime in cold space. Jake felt something shift in his chest, a protective warmth that made Nix's eyes widen. You're not used to being cared for, are you? Zephyrians don't form emotional bonds the way humans do, she explained. We mate for genetic compatibility, not emotional connection. But in your mind, I can feel what it's like to want someone not just physically, but... She struggled with the concept. Completely, Jake finished. Mind, body, heart, soul, the whole package. Nixa nodded, her opalescent eyes shimmering. It's overwhelming. When you look at me, I can feel how much you want to know my thoughts, my dreams, my fears. Not to use them, but to understand me. Because that's what attraction means to humans, Jake said softly. It's not just wanting someone, it's wanting to know them. The intensity of his sincerity made Nixa shiver. Through their connection, she could feel the absolute truth of his words, the depth of his genuine interest in her as a person. It was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. We should reach the station tomorrow, she said, trying to redirect the conversation to safer ground. But Jake's next thought made her gasp. I don't want this journey to end. The summit crisis. The Centauri station buzzed with diplomatic tension as representatives from 12 different species gathered for the most important peace summit in galactic history. Jake had barely escorted Nixa to the Zephyrian delegation quarters when alarms began blaring throughout the station. Security breach in Sector 7, came the announcement. All delegates to secure positions immediately. Jake's hand instinctively moved to his sidearm as he scanned the corridor. Through their now familiar mental connection, he felt Nix's spike of fear, not for herself, but for the peace process that hung in the balance. The Corvani delegation, she whispered, her face. I can hear their thoughts from here. They're planning something during the emergency. What kind of something? Jake demanded. But before she could answer, 3 figures in environmental suits rounded the corner, weapons drawn. Jake shoved Nixa behind a support pillar just as energy blasts scorched the air where they'd been standing. Stay down, he ordered, returning fire with practiced precision. But through their mental link, Nixa was experiencing something unprecedented, Jake's combat mindset. His thoughts were crystal clear, focused, protective. Every decision was calculated to keep her safe, even at the cost of his own life. The intensity of his protective instincts, combined with the very real danger, created a feedback loop of adrenaline and emotion that left her breathless. Behind you, she cried out, sensing another attacker before Jake could see him. Jake spun and fired in one fluid motion, his trust in her warning absolute. The would-be assassin dropped, his weapon, clattering across the floor. How did you? Jake started to ask, then realized. You're reading their thoughts. All of them, Nixa confirmed, her voice shaking. There are more coming. They're trying to eliminate the telepathic witnesses before they can identify who's behind this. Jake's mind immediately began calculating escape routes, defensive positions, ways to protect her. But underneath the tactical thinking, Nixa could feel something else. A fierce, almost primal determination that she would not be harmed while he drew breath. The emergency protocols, Jake said suddenly. They're herding us toward the secure zones, but it's a trap, Nixa finished, reading the plot from the attackers' minds. They want us contained in one place. Jake made a split-second decision. Instead of following protocol, he grabbed Nixa's hand and led her deeper into the station's maintenance levels. The moment their fingers intertwined, the mental connection between them intensified dramatically. Suddenly, Nixa wasn't just reading Jake's thoughts. She was sharing his determination, his courage, his absolute refusal to let harm come to those under his protection. And Jake, for the first time, caught flashes of her mind, her brilliant tactical analysis, her deep empathy for all the species represented at the summit. her growing feelings for him that she tried so hard to hide. You care about more than just me, Jake realized as they navigated the darkened corridors. You're trying to save everyone. As are you, she replied, squeezing his hand. That's what makes you extraordinary. Together, using their combined human intuition and Zephyrian telepathy, they began to unravel the conspiracy that threatened not just their lives, but the future of galactic peace. Mind-to-mind hidden in the station's central hub, Jake and Nixa worked frantically to expose the conspiracy before the attackers could complete their mission. Nixa's telepathic abilities, amplified by their physical connection, allowed her to sift through the minds of everyone on the station. It's not the Corvani, she whispered, her eyes closed in concentration. They're being used as scapegoats. The real orchestrators are... Oh no. What? Jake demanded, checking his weapon's charge. Level. Humans. A faction of your own military that doesn't want peace with the outer colonies. Nixa's voice carried pain and disappointment. They're planning to make it look like I assassinated the human delegate. Jake felt a surge of protective rage that made Nixa gasp. Through their link, she experienced the full force of human anger, not the cold calculation of Zephyrian displeasure, but a burning, righteous fury that someone would dare harm her or use her as a pawn. Over my dead body, he growled. That's what they're counting on, Nixa said softly. They know you'll try to protect me. They're planning to kill us both and claim I mind-controlled you into betraying your own species. Jake was quiet for a moment, his tactical mind working through possibilities. Then he looked at her with the expression that made her breath catch. There's another option, he said. We prove my actions are voluntary. We show them what a human looks like when he's making his own choices. How? Nixa asked, though part of her already knew from the warmth building in his thoughts. By letting them see what I really think of you, Jake said, moving closer. Not as a diplomatic asset or a useful ally, but as a woman I'm falling in love with. The words hit Nixa like a physical force. Through their connection, she felt the absolute truth of his statement. The way she'd become precious to him. How her safety mattered more than his career, his duty, even his life. Jake, she whispered. I can feel how much you mean that. Then, you also know this isn't some diplomatic strategy, he said, cupping her face gently. I don't care about species barriers or political complications. I care about you. When he kissed her, their mental connection exploded into something neither had expected. It wasn't just sharing thoughts anymore, it was sharing souls. Jake experienced her wonder at being cherished, her amazement at human emotional depth, her fear that this connection was too beautiful to last. Nixa felt his absolute certainty that she was worth fighting for, his awe at her strength and intelligence, his determination to build a future together regardless of the obstacles. They're coming. Nixa breathed against his lips, sensing the approaching attackers. Let them, Jake said, his hand steady on his weapon. They'll see a human who knows exactly what he's fighting for. As the conspirators burst into the hub, they found Jake and Nixa standing together, her hand in his, their mental connection blazing with a love so obvious that even non-telepaths could feel it in the air around them. Surrender the Zephyrian, the lead attacker demanded. She's compromised your judgment. Jake's laugh was sharp and fearless. My judgment's never been clearer, and if you think I'm going to let you hurt her, you've seriously underestimated what humans do for the people we love. The battle that followed was brief, but decisive, with Jake protecting Nixa, while she used her abilities to coordinate with station security. Together they exposed the conspiracy and saved the summit. But more importantly, they discovered something that would change both their species' understanding of what was possible between them. New Horizons 6 months after the Centauri station. Incident. Jake stood on the observation deck of the newly christened UES Harmony, watching the stars wheel past as the ship made its way towards Zephyrian space. The vessel was an experiment in interspecies cooperation, a joint human-Zephyrian exploration ship designed to seek out new worlds and new civilizations. You're thinking very loudly again, came a familiar melodic voice behind him. Jake turned, to find Nixa approaching, her crystalline skin shimmering in the starlight streaming through the viewports. She wore a modified Starfleet uniform that accommodated Zephyrian physiology while maintaining human military traditions, a symbol of the new alliance they'd helped forge. "Sorry," Jake said with a grin. "I was thinking about how much has changed." "Everything has changed," Nixa agreed, slipping her hand into his. The moment they touched, their mental connection sang to life, now a constant, comfortable presence rather than the overwhelming flood it had once been. "My people have started forming emotional bonds. Yours have begun developing telepathic sensitivity. The galaxy is becoming a very different place." Jake squeezed her fingers gently. "Any regrets about being the catalyst for all this change?" Through their link, Nixa shared a complex mix of emotions: pride in what they'd accomplished, joy in their growing love, excitement about the future they were building together. "How could I regret finding you?" she asked. "Even though it means leaving your homeworld behind?" "Jake Morrison," Nixa said, her opalescent eyes sparkling with mischief. "Are you worried that I'm making too many sacrifices for love?" Jake's mind immediately filled with concern for her happiness. Worry that he was asking too much. Fear that she might someday resent choosing him over her original life. Nixa felt every protective, caring thought, and smiled. "That's exactly why I love you," she said softly. "A Zephyrian male would have assumed my choice was logical, calculated for optimal outcomes. But you worry about my heart. Because your heart matters to me," Jake replied simply. "I know. I can feel it every moment of every day." Nixa stood on her toes to kiss him gently. "And that's why I have no regrets. You've shown me what it means to be truly known and loved for who I am, not what I can do." Their kiss was interrupted by the ship's communication system. "Captain Morrison to the bridge, we're receiving signals from an unknown species." Jake and Nixa exchanged glances, their shared excitement building. "Another first contact," Jake said. "Another chance to show the galaxy what's possible when species truly connect," Nixa added. As they made their way to the bridge together, Jake's mind wandered to their first meeting, when Nixa's ability to read his thoughts had seemed like such a complication. Now he couldn't imagine a relationship without that deep, intimate connection. "You're thinking about our first day together," Nixa observed. "I was thinking about how lucky I am," Jake corrected. "You could have ended up with any human escort that day." Nixa's mental voice was warm with affection as she replied directly into his mind. "But I didn't. I ended up with the one human whose thoughts were worth reading, and whose heart was worth sharing." Hand in hand, mind to mind, they walked onto the bridge to face whatever new adventure awaited them among the stars. Behind them, the galaxy continued its slow transformation, species by species learning that connection, real, deep, honest connection, was the key to peace. And it had all started with a human whose thoughts were too loud to ignore, and a Zephyrian who discovered that sometimes the most beautiful thing about reading someone's mind is finding out they're thinking about you. The end.